Yes, you guys, welcome back to a 3 things we learned versus Wolves. For the 3 things, I'm going to be focusing on Hudson Odoi and why Tuchel did play him as a right wing back. For the second thing we learned, I'm going to be discussing Kai Havertz and his movement throughout the game. And for the third and final thing we learned, I'm going to focus on Tuchel and the context that was missing behind the team's performance against Wolves. So I hope you guys do enjoy. And to start off with the first thing we learned, that was why did Tuchel play Hudson Odoi as a right wing back in his first game. Now to kick things off, I'm going to play some segments from Hudson Odoi's interview after the game to explain the tactical instructions that Tuchel gave to him and some of Tuchel's general ideas in regards to how he wants his team to play in the future too.
For myself, he wants me to be direct as much as possible and keep getting at the fullbacks and defenders as much as possible. I feel like he knows all the attacking players can create and score goals, and he wants us all to be direct and keep pushing to try get goals, get assists for the team. But for myself, he told me just to go up and down that line, keep being direct, stay as high and wide as possible and try and get as quick as possible. But also keep trying to break the line and keep making sure you're doing different movements to get on the ball, which obviously I really understand what he's trying to get at, and he's trying to make sure from the start from yesterday that he wants us to keep going in behind, find different passes.
Now that we've heard the instructions, why did Tuchel play Hudson Odoi as a wing-back? I'm here to break that down for you guys. So, the reason behind why Tuchel used Hudson Odoi as a right wing-back was to exploit Wolves' defensive structure. With wing-backs, they aren't just full-backs set to attack. Wing-backs help aid the overloads. And the overload is key against teams like this in the wide areas, and that's why Tuchel instructed Hudson Odoi to get in behind, to be direct, to run up and down that channel. And because Callum's a very intelligent player, he can find, the skills and the techniques to evade his man, to sometimes even move in field, Ziyech moving out wide on the right. But the plan was to constantly be isolated 1v1 against the Wolves fullbacks because, based on their form, the wing-backs for Wolves have not been as good over their past few games. So this is an example of a manager looking at the weaknesses of a team and trying to find a tactical solution to, of course, exploit that and hopefully get the win. Now with Callum playing as a wing-back, in a sense, he wasn't really one. He was kind of like a winger anyway, because in the offensive phase, we did become a 4-2-3-1 team, and to accommodate the overloads in those wide areas down the right-hand side, Tuchel had Azpilicueta pushing further forward into the mid-lines, essentially just acting as a fullback. Rudiger split wide on the left too, making a back four, and the reason behind that was because Tuchel did not want his midfield players to leave their positions. He wanted these guys and Jorginho and Kovac to remain close to each other. We saw Lampard do this last season too, because if you use these guys, they have to be close to each other at all times, because when it comes to defending the counter-attacks out wide, imagine if a Wolves player, they are running in the space behind that Callum's left, and then Kovac has to leave his position, or Jorginho has to leave to track that runner down, as we've seen. That's when they're at their weakest. So this is where Tuchel's football becomes very asymmetric, in the sense that just because the starting formation looks like a 3-4-3, does not mean that it's going to be that strict 3-4-3 that we saw under Conte, that very rigid style of 3-4-3. The formation adapts to the occasions on the field. Now, by defending in this type of manner, not only do we get to destroy the counter-attack out wide because we're outmanning that area, it then means that when we receive the ball back, Hudson Odoi should be 1v1 against his man, where he's going to use his techers and his ability, where the game becomes 1v1. And with the big teams, big teams tend to prosper more in 1v1 situations against the smaller ones. And that's because we have the better individual player. With Tuchel's football, it's about that sense of control, which is very important. Control in all areas. Control in limiting the opposition. Control in influencing our game of the opposition. And control in creating the best opportunities on goal to win you the game. This is only a small example of some of the things that we are going to see Tuchel doing. I mean, you can imagine that Hudson Odoi will be playing games out wide on the left, further forward, and the formations, the lineups, the teams, they're going to be dependent on the opposition that we're playing against. But there you guys, this was the reason behind why Hudson Odoi was played as a right wing back. I mean, it basically felt like a winger, to be honest. And as we saw as the game went on, with Callum moving down that left hand side, Pulisic playing down the right, Tuchel does not use his wide players in traditional ways. And now we move on to the second thing we learned, and I want to focus on Kai Havertz and his individual performance against Wolves, because one thing that really stood out to me was Havertz's movement throughout the game. And I feel like it's this movement in particular which eventually is going to be a massive focal point for the team, and this is how Tuchel will get the very best out of him, and of course then getting the best out of the team. So without wasting any more time, let's look at his performance right here. Now, I've paused it straight off the bat, but there's a reason for this, you guys, and this right here is an example of the wide rotations that we are going to see under Tuchel. Now, essentially the plan is that Ben, he holds his position out wide on the byline, extremely wide. Kai, his position is more infield, but Kai just doesn't move blindly. He looks to position himself to pin opposing players. So he likes to be in areas in front of the centre-back and in behind the midfield player. So then essentially when the ball gets played out wide to Ben, he receives that. That then attracts the attention of the opposite fullback or wingback, which then means there's space in behind for Kai to run into. Another example there, as I was saying, you guys, the position Kai's in, he's taking players out the game, and in this area right here, Ben should have played the ball over the top for Kai to run onto, but I think it wasn't the best game from Ben on the night, to be honest. But here's an example of Kai's intelligent movement off the ball. Yeah, that one day is going to be before I even finish my point, you guys, wow. I'm sorry, but Rudiger, the amount of space that Kai found himself into, why was there not one pass play to him? That makes no sense. It's examples of this that I see in regards to the execution limiting the system, limiting the tactical understanding. And it's stuff like this, you guys, that pass should have been played into Kai then. And right here's another prime example. Kai, he's got in behind his midfield player. He's seen that Bowley is attracted to where the ball is. And now he's running into that space. That massive space that's Mado's left to, because he wasn't tight with his man because Ben is taking him out. When Kai runs into that space, there has to be a lob ball over the top to find him. But what happens instead? Wrong move. And again, another example of the poor execution that could basically limit Tuchel's tactics and his principles, because it does take time in the training field to get this stuff right, you guys. See, Kai, I feel like this role that Tuchel wants to use him in, and he's got this kind of creative freedom, like a roaming 8. I mean, there's so many names for these positions in football, you guys. I just like to use my eye test, to be honest. But again, another example of him being in behind the midfield lines. He knows when to time his run. He knows how to enter that space, and of course, accelerates, and wrong cross by Callum in that moment. But again, it's another example of Kai. He's escaped his marker. He's unmarked. And I'm going to keep calling this guy the German ghost, because again, he's constantly unmarked. He's in areas where no one finds him. And then due to his acceleration, his speed, his intelligence, he finds himself in those dangerous areas every time. And eventually, moves like this will end up being goals for Kai. Yep, good pressing by Kai right there. That was one of the ball recoveries, I guess, that Tuchel was mentioning. And yeah, see, this is why I like this guy, you guys. He's a quick player, one touch, two touch and move. He's not just looking to stand there and wait. And the bottleneck's going to be, if we're not going to find his runs enough, with a few of these guys too, then you're going to limit the system and the effectiveness. But see, here, this was an example by Cover who found him, and as the season goes on, I expect us to get stronger in our understanding and obviously produce these moments of more quality and more consistency. And here, again, an example of Kai withdrawn from the play and then affecting the area afterwards. And, Cover, great pass by Cover again. A few times Cover was finding him in the game. Great passing behind, and of course Kai knows exactly what he's going to do before he's even received the ball. He plays the pass to Ben, and to be honest, Ben's techers was off point. But yeah, running behind, wasn't found then. Ziyech finds him there, but this was a massive L from Ben, and I feel like his performance could have been a lot stronger in that game. We saw an identical moment not too long ago in these clips, you guys. We saw the pass that Kai played back to Ben, Kai, he's a smart guy. He delayed his run because he knew that there was space that was vacated for him to take a shot on goal. So the fact that Ben did not see that and had his head down the entire time looking for Giroud, it's a big mistake. And with this style of football, you can't afford to be wasteful in areas like this. I mean, yeah, terrible. Yep, running behind by Kai, doesn't get found, and you know, I feel like I'm not going to be angry at Ben because most times he's playing alongside of Werner, he's playing alongside of Pulisic and Mason Mount, and not too often with Kai down the left hand side. So this is what happens when there's not real time to work in this stuff in training. But finally Ben plays a pass in behind quickly, and there you guys was examples of Havertz's movement, how important it's going to be for us as the season goes on, and the things that his teammates have to do to find him, to get the best out of him, to maximize him. When Kai's maximized, the rest of the team will be maximized, and you know, I feel like Tuchel knows exactly what he needs to see from Kai. Now for the third and final thing we learned, expect Tuchel to be a scapegoat for the media. Now, of course, the way Lampard was sacked, it's only natural that emotions are going to be heightened, and you guys saw my videos, you know that I wasn't happy about that either. But as I've stressed, Tuchel is a different manager, and every time we have a new manager, I need to have an open mind because it's my job, you guys, and because, you know, Tuchel's a great manager too, a likable character, and of course, you know, he deserves the time to show what he's really about. After that game, there was lots of criticism in regards to the passing without purpose, in regards to the lack of shots on goal, to how considered and patient the football was, and comparisons were made with Sarri ball as well. But one thing that links your Sarris, your Lampards, and now your Tuchels is that it's the context that is forever lacked and missed out on. Now, what do I mean by context? Number one, Tuchel has barely had any time to work with the team. Of course, when he took over the Wolves game, he was only in control for 24 hours, a 1-hour training session, and already we saw some very interesting things from a structure point of view and in regards to our positioning to limit the counter-attacking threats of our opposition. So in that sense, there were many tactical observations to make and many positive ones too, but to continue on, because there were so many reasons behind why the game was exactly how it was, and to continue on by speaking about the context, Wolves at no point made any attempts to leave their blocks. You can see on the heat map, you guys, that they just stayed in position. They defended the entire game, very disciplined of course, but at no attempts did they look to press the ball, create shots on goal, and that was reflected in the stats afterwards. There was no complaints of Wolves having 0 shots on goal, there was no complaints of Wolves having 0 shooting accuracy as well, and they were completely forgotten about, and due to Wolves making 0 attempt to press, it effectively meant that the game was cancelled out, because with how Tuchel wants his teams to play, there is purpose behind the passing. The idea of the passing is to lull your opponents into that false sense of security. It's about attracting the opposition players into certain areas you want them to be in before quickly moving the ball out wide, creating the overloads and then getting in behind. And how can you do that when your opponents didn't look to leave their blocks once? They were happy to keep their positions throughout, and the heat maps reflect that. And of course, for one of the major reasons too behind why the game was played how it was, is that if you're a new manager, you want to see that defensive solidity. You want to build the foundations first. It's what every good manager does. You start from the back first before moving forwards. I'm sure Tuchel himself knows that throughout the season, there may be times where he has to prioritize the result over the philosophy, and for major reason. I mean, he's only got an 18-month contract. He has to get us a Champions League spot by the end of the season, and once he does, that's when his work can really take off. Does this mean though that we won't see this as the season goes on? Of course not, but for the first few games, it's about building those foundations, because we are now going to be a possession team. It's about limiting the spaces that we give for counterattacks. So it was no surprise why Tuchel said after the game, we made 16 ball recoveries, and this was a major positive in the game because it's about building those foundations first. With Tuchel's lineups and formations, a lot of times they are going to be catered towards the opposition we're playing against, and It made a lot of sense now to use a back three because of course they play with Adama and Neto up front centrally together. The plan from Nuno was that once Wolves were able to create on the counter-attack, Neto and Adama would run into the spaces left and behind, and by having that back three, it meant that we could go man v man against every single one, giving more time for the rest of the team in the midfield to come back into position and minimise the Wolves' counter-attacking threat. One thing that was obvious too is that we aren't necessarily going to be a high-pressing team. In a sense, we're looking to focus our press in those mid-block areas, which is key. You know, so many times we were able to snuff out potential Wolves attacks due to this. And that was because then the back three, who are just analysing the game in front of them, they could push that defensive line forwards, and then wherever the ball was located, we could then congest those areas of the field, overload those areas, and win possession back. And on that point, you guys, that was the third and final thing we learned. Foundations are being built to make us more difficult to play against, and it's exactly why Tuchel said that he wants to build a team that everyone is going to fear. I'm Nini FC, this is Blue Lines TV. I'll catch you guys later with some more videos.